Hello again, everybody. Great to have you along as we welcome you to yet another edition of Journey Through Sports and Life. Scott, Marjorie, Marnie, and this trifecta is here to share some great information with you and always introduce you to some very special people in this world that make sports the world that it really is, right?
Oh, it is. And we've got a great guest today.
We do. Well, I tell you what, would you like to introduce her?
Well, I would love to.
All right, go for it.
So we have with us today Melissa Isaacson. I've known Melissa since the 80s when we were both covering the NFL.
Grade, huh?
That's right.
I was trying to help you on the age. You say.
Well, we were almost in second grade, but thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. We were both, well, actually, we met at Wimbledon. We met when we shared a flat when our newspapers were kind of working on keeping expenses low.
And a blind date.
Yeah, that's right. We've been great friends ever since.
What do you think, Marnie? Sounds like too much information to me, huh?
And
I think it's a scoop of the moment.
Yeah. Best friends since Wimbledon, 1986.
Well, tell us what she's doing today.
But what she's doing today, gosh, here my allergies are getting me. She is currently a professor, an assistant professor at at Northwestern University. She teaches sports writing. And this comes on the heels of a wonderful career as a columnist and beat writer at the Chicago Tribune, where she also covered Michael Jordan and the Bulls. That was one of her beats. And then, of course, she also covered the Bears. And before that, she had covered Tampa Bay when she was with the Orlando Sentinel. She's covered a lot of teams, Olympics, different sports, you name it, she's done it. And now she teaches sports writing at Northwestern. And she's also author of the book State, A Team, a Triumph, a Transformation. And that's pretty much what we'd like to talk about today, is the fact that your book is about your experience as a high school basketball player in the 70s. And then now what we see today where up to 18 million people watched the College March Madness women's basketball final. And you also, like Caitlin Clark, graduated from the University of Iowa, and Lisa Bluter and the head coach there. And so, we want to spend some time now just talking about how women's basketball has changed, where we're going, and how amazed you might be at what you're seeing.
Now, before you do that, though, I'm going to ask one pre-question to all of that. Marjorie has given us just a plethora of knowledge of all the things that you were a part of. Before we talk about basketball and what have you, was there one thing that you really enjoyed more than any? She talks about Wimbledon. She talks about what as you look back on your incredible career, is there one thing that stands out that really is part of your legacy?
Well, it's hard not to pick the Michael Jordan Bulls. I covered 4 championships as the principal beat writer for the Tribune, and that was just the experience of a career, to see that traveling, like compared to the Beatles and, sort of a cliche.
But of course, you only read about the Beatles,
Yeah, exactly. And I never wrote the cliche because, it was far be it from me to be cliche. But no, it was amazing. I mean, being on, witnessing the buses being rocked and, seeing Michael Jordan daily, at his peak, in the middle of his career when he was really something, and watching that Bulls team, those championship Bulls teams, play on a regular basis, it really shaped me in many ways. And it's part of how I teach. It's like, it seems like it'd be the greatest story every day, and it was. But the challenge was to tell people the story that they weren't seeing, because they were so deluged even then with information every day. They got cameras are coming in the locker room and they were seeing post-game interviews. So to bring readers into, in this arena, in this stadium where they couldn't afford tickets, most people, or couldn't get tickets.
Yeah.
That became the challenge. And so it was like writing a book every season, telling the story. I love covering the Bears too, because I grew up a huge Bears fan, and it's a Bears town, Chicago, after everything else.
Yeah.
With every other team, it still is a Bears town. So that was incredible too. So it's hard to really pick, but if I had to, that would probably be it.
Were you there? Were you there in '85 when the Bears Won
I
the
was not.
Okay.
No, I was in Florida at Florida Today. Oh, I had just gone to. It was just before USA Today, and I was a kid. I was like a few years out of school, but they sent me to Chicago to do some Bears stories. So that was like a big thrill, and I got to do. And of course, that team was of great interest. And I was already covering the NFL. I didn't cover that Super Bowl, but I was covering the NFL. So I was immersed in and still keep in touch with many of those Bears players, but I didn't cover that team or that Super Bowl.
Okay, and my last question, then we'll get to the real nuts of what we're talking about here today. The fact that you were a woman, and of course I met Marjorie back in the mid-'80s, back in 86, when all of a sudden Tom Landry said, things are going to change, guys. Guess what? We've got a female covering sports. So you covering Michael Jordan, and as you just said, and I didn't know that, but you were the number one writer or journalist for the Bulls. I mean, that's unheard of, especially back in the 80s and 90s. That was now it's as commonplace as getting up in the morning to see the females, and I think they all do a great job. But back then it was non-existent. I mean, Marnie, her dad was there, her grandfather was the owner of the Philadelphia Eagles. Back in 1980, for Pete's sake, there were no women on the sidelines doing things. It was just a whole different world than what it is today. So I just wondered, congratulations to you for being a part of that legacy as well. You've got to be proud of that.
Oh, very much so. And Marge will tell you that there are still women around. I was in a big market. She was in a big market. So there were women with radio. There were some women with TV, but it certainly wasn't at the numbers that it is today, and it wasn't the numbers that it should be. I got some good support for the most part, and from my colleagues at the Tribune. So it wasn't terrible. It was, players didn't love us being around necessarily, but once they got to know us, especially in the NFL, that was a little bit more of a tough sell. But, I was lucky, very, very, very lucky to have a front seat there. And I think the 80s were a little more of a learning curve and
right.
Definitely.
With women. But by the 90s, I think everybody was pretty much on board. That
Absolutely.
We existed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, good for you. Good for you. Take it away.
Well, Missy, what do you think about this sensation? What's happening now in women's basketball at the college level, what happened in March Madness, and then what we anticipate with the WNBA with so many of these stars that got so much attention coming in with more name recognition than probably other stars in the past.
Yeah, I mean, the Chicago Sky, it got Camila Cardozo and Angel Reese, which I mean,
wow.
Any other year, you're like, oh my God, this is the draft picks. And so immediately ticket sales went up and immediately interest went up. And so that was like unheard of and really exciting because the Skies, they won a WNBA championship. They've been around for 25 plus years. And so, and they've been trying to more or less no avail to really engage the public as they should. So add Caitlin to the mix, and the fact that she'll be in twice, already, boom, tickets were sold out. Chicago fans saw what the Mystics did, moving their game into a bigger arena, and right away I was on the phone with this owner, Michael Alter, and he's like, logistically we can't. So people were demanding it already.
Wow.
He had already tried, but we have the Democratic National Convention this summer at the United Center. So that throws off like a lot of time, a big chunk of time. And you can't just kind of find an open date and jam it in, the Beaver has to have. So it's going to be a very hot ticket. It's already like $4,000 at most. I mean, it's
really
comes to town. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. I noticed that the prices really went high when here in Dallas with the Wings on the dates that I did some research because I anticipated Caitlin Clark getting drafted by the Fever just like everybody else did. So a couple of months ago, I went on and bought my family tickets for her 2 games coming into town when they were only 4 times the price of a regular ticket.
And you didn't know she was going to the Fever for sure.
Right, exactly.
sense. But we all knew.
And so,
and you had to wait till she declared, so you couldn't have.
Yeah, exactly. It was just a shot at it. But I did notice then, and I notice now when I look at it, those are the highest tickets. And then now the Chicago tickets are getting higher too when Angel Reese and Cardozo come into town. So, it's really an interesting phenomenon to see this happening. Don't you think, Marnie?
Oh, definitely. And what you were saying about going ahead and purchasing tickets. In Charlotte, we don't have a WNBA team. So, but Atlanta is not far. And I looked into like what was going to happen with the Fever playing in Atlanta, and they were, the ticket prices were already very high and almost impossible to secure. So,
wow.
Yeah, I wasn't as quick as a thinker as you are, Marjorie.
I'll sell you my tickets for $10,000 each.
But next time you need to send out a group text, be like, hey, everybody, here's what I'm doing in advance of this. And then,
the question, what you guys brought up at first, and the question I've asked, as I talked to various people is, is it a moment in time? Is it a movement? Is it officially,
That's a good question.
A real point in time where we'll look back and say, no, this is where it shifted. This is where it all changed. And we're all so giddy about it. We're just excited that there is that interest. We're excited that there are players that are so good and we want to watch. And so you're tempted to just immediately say it's a movement. But I've given it a lot of thought, and I do think it is a movement. I think that Caitlin has a kind of game, say what you will, the other players are really gifted. And, full disclaimer, you already said I went to Iowa, so I can't be fully objective. But she is a real generational player, really the true definition of it. Not because she's better than everybody and she's better than Cheryl Miller ever was. It's not that. It's how she plays.
Mm-hmm.
It's the consistent long distance threes. Like, how many coaches would allow a player to shoot from half court? Pretty much.
Her logo threes. Right? Yeah, exactly.
And get away with that. And at first, I remember when she first started doing that, and Lisa Bluter would be jumping up like, no, oh yay, and once she saw that she was able to change the game with shooting consistently that way and opening up her team. I mean, it completely changed everything for her. So that was very exciting to see a player not just heaving it. It's not that easy to shoot.
Oh, gosh.
If you look at where she hit the record breaker, a lot of people have gone and stood on that little circle. And, you got to be, her leg, it's all leg.
Yes, and she makes it look effortless.
Easy.
She makes it,
yeah.
And she shoots off balance, which you don't teach.
Right.
Often she's, she creates her own shot, but she'll shoot off one foot often.
Mm-hmm.
But even more than that, for people who are really astute fans of hers and have watched, she was a soccer player growing up, and she was a great athlete, obviously, growing up. And my students, we covered the Northwestern Iowa game this year, and so they were freelancing.
So you saw her play at Northwestern?
Yeah. So it was a little bit of a fight, too, getting in, but I saw it ahead of time and tried to get freelance work. And so we did stories for USA Today and the Baltimore Sun, because they were playing Maryland next, Iowa, and the Des Moines Register and Cedar Rapids Gazette, on. And they did wonderful stories. And one of the guys did a story, this is in January, about how she grew up as a soccer player, and that's where she developed the ability to pass, to see the whole field. She was great in soccer. And if you watch her carefully, or even remotely, I don't know, you don't have to watch her that carefully. Her passes are extraordinary.
Oh, they are, and I can't wait to see when WNBA players are on the receiving end of those passes.
Absolutely.
Oh,
and even players that aren't used to, well, now they're used to the force of her passes, but she catches them right in stride, full court, and not to mention behind her back, and keeps the ball moving. I mean, these are wonderful players that Iowa has. They're not all Americans, all of them.
Right.
And she's lifted and elevated in a way. So the idea of her now playing with professionals, now playing with Aaliyah Boston, who who was the number 1 draft pick last year. Oh my God. Like, how can you not want to watch that?
Oh, exactly. And, you talked about like the logo threes and all of her shooting ability, but she had a quote at her press conference when she was introduced that all she needs to do is feed the ball to Aaliyah Boston, and that'll be a show all on its own.
Totally. She will. And it'll open up her shot. And right away, she's a tough cookie. Like, she's not, a lot of times kids come in from college and they have to bulk up, and boys, men, and women. But she's very strong. She's much stronger than she might look. And I'd be surprised if she'll get knocked around. There's no question. She'll get bounced around. She'll get stronger. But I think she'll be able to handle it the same way she handled, if you saw in the NCAA tournament, everyone was coming at her, and knocking her around. I mean,
right.
And it wasn't easy, and she really had to adjust. But with supporting players to open it up, I think she'll be great. And I mean, and just watching to see if she'll be great and how she'll be, with 90, I believe it's 90 or 95% of their games are going to be nationally televised, the Fever. So you don't have to pay a lot of money. You can sit at home and watch now. So it's going to be tons of fun, and I think it is going to move the needle finally.
So I have one question before we go to Scott, because it just kind of fits in with this. You had mentioned Scott had talked about the 1980s, and you came up, and then now women are, how did you say, as common as getting up in the morning?
Yeah.
Do you think now with her popularity and the popularity of so many other of the girls that are women that are coming into the WNBA now, do you think it's also timing? That maybe society is in a place right now where we can see, just like women in sports writing and covering sports, the timing. She came along, because you mentioned Cheryl Miller. She was outstanding. Unbelievable. Yeah, unbelievable. But maybe now is just kind of the right time.
The right time. I think it is. I think, a lot of it was just getting eyes there, because a few years ago, I remember the Phoenix Mercury, you may have remembered this, Marjorie, that they had a promotion that any man who would come to, I don't know if they said men, but I think they did, any guy who never has been to a WNBA game, they would give him a free ticket. Obviously, it's sort of the honor system.
Yeah.
But their idea was just come watch, just see it. Because for years now, the WNBA has been a really entertaining product. They're fundamentally sound. There's tons of parity. There's only 12 teams, so it's very difficult to make an WNBA roster. So there's lots of skill and there's lots of parity, and it's almost always an exciting game. So it's a tough sell on TV. It always was, and maybe still is, because if your eyes are, used to watching an NBA game and you see it above the rim, you're not going to see that same above the rim game, and the speed might look slower. And so right away people were like, we're not going to go watch. But people watched it, were impressed. And there was always very loyal cores of fans for different WNBA teams. Now the college game, I think, though, has legitimately improved. If you would have tuned in 5-10 years ago, you'd see a lot of women. They had strength and speed, but they didn't have the same body control. You'd see a lot of women sprawled on the floor, knocked down on the floor. They'd knock into each other in the lane. But what also adjusted were the officials. The officiating, they'd call fouls at every little touch. They didn't allow that extra half step that maybe men are allowed. And so with the women getting better and having better body control and just across the board being better shooters and stronger, the officials have adjusted, and I've loved to see that, because they're letting them play.
Yeah.
And you always hear that. Just let them play, because there's nothing worse than watching. I mean, it's ridiculous to compare, but when I played in high school, like, oh my God, it was a whistle every second. Like, if you,
I remember those days.
Remember? I mean, if your pivot foot, like, slid, traveling.
Right.
It was ridiculous. So,
yeah, I played in high school too, and that sounds very familiar.
Yeah.
Well, you talked, what she's done for, what we all got a chance to see this year. But I remember covering sports in the 80s and the 90s, 2000s, people like Nancy Lieberman. But they were an exception to the rule. So what is it that she was, you talked about how she could, pass off, or her soccer career did served her well and things like that. So today, as a, you're a columnist, but be a coach here for a minute. What would you tell young girls? Because I guarantee, as sure as we're sitting here, even though she's an exception to the rule, I would think there were still girls back in the 80s and 90s, or, I had 2 younger sisters and a daughter, and they were all very athletic. But, there was nobody there to say, you got to do this to take it to the next level. There are guys.
True. Yes.
Roger Staubach comes out of the Naval Academy in 73, goes on and does what he does with the Cowboys. Pro Football Hall of Fame. Now then you get Troy Aikman. He comes years. What did he, he looks to this day. I was with Troy Friday night at an event we were doing for the Children's Cancer Fund. And we were talking about how things had changed. And there was Dak Prescott. Here's the quarterback of the Cowboys. How different people learn from. So what is it that girls could learn from her today that there maybe hadn't been that role model, hadn't been that Michael Jordan.
Or that coach.
Coach.
To really good coaches
to just
girls.
Help them. What are some of the things that these young girls today should be looking to do to take their game to the next level?
I mean, you bring up a good point about, coaches weren't encouraging the same kind of play because, we were all learning. Officials were learning. Women coaches, for a long time it was only women who were coaching girls and women. That was a good thing. They were learning along with us too. So, but I think girls are watching at a much higher rate. Those ratings didn't come from just adults. And they are, I've watched some high school basketball. I've seen players who are outstanding shooters in high school and passers. So they are improving, whether it's just from watching Caitlin or it's just a natural progression. You have to understand, men have been playing basketball a heck of a lot longer than women at a high rate, or at a high level anyway. The NBA was in the mid-'60s. The WNBA was in the late 90s. So it takes a while for everybody to catch up. Again, women are going to play a little different game. You're never going to see a majority of women, dunking or whatever. But that doesn't define what's good basketball. Right. I think women are just getting to be better shooters. We didn't have a 3-point line when I played, obviously. Once they put the 3-point line, it challenged girls and women to get better, to get stronger. We didn't weight train. We certainly didn't, know anything about that. And so all of that's happening. And if you watch high school games, you'll see a great level. There's a girl who plays locally, right near where I live, and she's maybe 5'6", and it's going to hurt her a bit recruiting, but she's still getting a lot of attention. And she's shooting from maybe not half court, but well beyond the 3-point line consistently. Wow. And passing like crazy. And I'm sure she's not the only kid in the country or even in Illinois doing that. So they are catching up, and they will. And they are, I think, you could say they're getting the wrong lesson if they just go and try to heave half court shots when they're not ready or, good. Mm-hmm. And that's for their coaches to control. But what Lisa Bluter did in saying, no, yeah, and encourage it and let her be the kind of player she is, and let her play with freedom. She's, you have to hand it to her too. She didn't overcoach her.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
So how do we sustain this though? How do we sustain, because this is, a really strong start right now, but how do we sustain it? Because it is exciting. And as a woman, I enjoy watching women's basketball, but how do we continue with this trend?
Yeah, I think it's going to happen because now people will allow, will be more open to seeing, more players that aren't Caitlin, right? And so, Iowa got a player from, now I'm blanking, the player that they just got, who's a very high scorer.
The transfer
portal.
Yeah.
She's a good shooter.
Yeah.
Like, it'll be hard for Iowa fans to watch, but Juju Watkins is coming to the Big Ten from USC. She's an incredibly gifted and exciting player, and she's only a freshman now. And so there's great players. Paige Beckers is still in college. We saw what she can do.
Yeah.
There's many, many more players in the pipeline, and now people may give it a chance and may say, you know what, that's a good game. Connecticut playing, UConn playing South Carolina. I'm going to watch. Just like they might watch Duke and North Carolina or whatever. So in Tennessee, when they were great, under Pat Summitt, they were playing great ball, and people maybe just weren't watching. Candace Parker, and there was some great basketball along the way, but maybe now they'll just get those eyes from people who are willing to give it a chance. They've been good for a while.
They certainly have. Yes. And like Scott mentioned, Nancy Lieberman, we all, and that was long before the WNBA as well.
Absolutely.
She played with the men. I don't know if you remember.
Yeah, she did.
To cover her, but she played for the Continental Basketball Association.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Kind of a publicity stunt, but she was fine.
And she's coached men.
And she's coached men, and even Ann Myers was had a tryout with the Indiana Pacers.
I remember that. Yes.
Yeah, that really was a publicity stunt. But she, and they were doing it just like, but she was great. She was one of the original pioneers, and we talk about those USC teams with Miller. It was great. They were wonderful players. The McGee twins, and
then Texas Tech with Cheryl Swoops.
And Lynette Woodard. Many, many unbelievable players. Now you feel bad that we didn't appreciate them.
Right. And that's why I was asking you. Maybe it's just the timing, because they certainly had the talent. And if they were playing today, they'd grab all kinds of eyes, people.
Cheryl Miller used to beat Reggie Miller. Granted, he was her little brother.
but still.
They'd have one-on-ones, in the driveway. And for a long time, she would beat him. And even when he was like a college player, she would hold her ground.
Oh, yeah. And he readily admitted it. He was proud of her.
Yeah. That was fun.
So Missy, one thing in your book that I still can see so clearly, because you wrote it so beautifully, about how before you would play games, the team would go out and pull out the bleachers hoping that people would show up, and often the bleachers were still pretty empty until you guys got to the point where you were competing for state championships, and you were one of the first teams in the state of Illinois to win a girls basketball state championship. But when I envision the team coming out there and actually pulling out the bleachers and really the beginning of what it was like for girls to dream big, could you have ever imagined that we would be here today where 18 million people would watch a March Madness women's basketball final?
Well, that's funny you say that, because yes, because the 70s were, you've come a long way, baby, and everything was possible, like you said, and we were at this, beginning years of Title IX, where we were just really seeing the fruits of Title IX, and allowed to play in the big gym and given, home and away uniforms. They're very incremental little things. We played with boys practicing. Not a lot of girls did that. That was one of the reasons I think that we won, and we got a lot of toughness through it, and our coach allowed us to do that. And so pretty soon the whole school really supported us. But if you would have told us in 1979, one day 18 million TV viewers are going to be watching the women's college tournament, I think that we would have, as 17-year-olds, been like, in 45, 50 years, I'm going to coach the Bulls, and my friend's going to be the GM, and why wouldn't we think that? And we're still not there, really. So that's great, but in many, many ways, we're still not there, because you're not seeing women GMs, and you're not seeing the number of women athletic directors that you should see. And, there's a lot of Title IX things that we're not living up to. It's a lot of teams, a lot of schools, colleges that aren't complying, and we don't have Title IX police running around, so people have to bring lawsuits, and you still see that. You go to any high school. I just talked to a high school a few weeks ago. It's a private school in Chicago, a beautiful, high tuition, gorgeous, wonderful Jesuit school. And I said to one of the kids, so does the baseball team and the softball team have the same facilities? And they all laughed. They're like, oh, God, not at all.
Yeah.
Like the softball team is just this little dinky field and the baseball team is a stadium. Well, that's a violation of Title IX. And so I was trying to tell them, like, they're not allowed to do that. Like you could. So we have a long way to go still. We really do. But,
you mentioned no GMs. Marnie right here, her mother, she'll tell you, and how many since? Go ahead.
Well, yeah, my mom was and still to this day is the first and only female general manager of a professional football team. And that was 83 to 85 and a half, 86. And since then, there has not been another woman that's held that position. But equally as interesting is that, my mom's legacy, and Marjorie and Scott are very helpful in helping me to promote that, is almost like it because it hasn't happened in so long, like, did it really ever happen? And, finding, there's so many great women. My mom thought that women were amazing in professional sports. And certainly in Philadelphia, there's been a tradition of having women in high level positions, but just has not happened in across the board yet.
That's because she did such a great job. Nobody else wants to even have to follow in her.
Yeah,
wow, thank you.
Right?
She did, yeah.
That will change. I think that will change. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Because, you can't just put a woman in as a GM or anybody and be like, okay, go at it. Football. You've got to start, as on the football side of things in scouting and personnel, and go up the ladder like most GMs have done, most male GMs. Well, now you're seeing it. The Bears just hired their first woman scout, or they had their first woman scout a couple of years ago. They just hired their first woman assistant coach. But so again, they've got to, we still have to pay our dues, but we've got to get the opportunity to pay our dues. And so I think you will see more. I think you will. Same thing. There's more and more pressure. A team like the Bears never had women, and now the last couple of years they do. So.
Well, hopefully when we're talking to you on our show in 20 years, Scott will say women GMs are just like as common as waking up in the morning. Yeah. Wouldn't that be nice?
There you go. There you go. Let me ask you this. You sitting here, I haven't said a lot because I'm fascinated with some of the things that you're sharing as the only guy in this conversation here. But again, as someone that had a mother that I ultimately respected to the nth degree, and then two younger sisters and a daughter that have all been very, very successful in their lives. And so when I hear you talk with what you're doing, and just your thoughts on sports and where women fit in that whole dynamic, whether it's as a player, whether it's as a GM, whether it's as a columnist, it doesn't matter. What do you see now here in the year 2024 as we move forward now, the second half of the year and beyond? Where do you see, or would you like to see women really take a hold and say, this is where we really need to be, and this is someplace we really could do this, and this is, we talk about Caitlin and all that we've seen here in the last month and a half or 2 months, and we go, wow. How about other wow factors? What are some other things that we might see, or you see, or you would like to see women get more involved in the world of sports and athletics?
Yeah, there's a real tie-in when we celebrated the 50th anniversary of Title IX. It was 2 years ago. There was a lot of stats that were very interesting, and one of which was 93% of all women in C-suite positions, so CEOs and executive high-ranking positions, all played team sports. 93% played team sports. It's no coincidence that Title IX did usher in a generation of independent thinking women who could, given the right support system and the right opportunities, could become very, very successful. And, little boys, when we grew up, I think, well, at least Marjorie and I grew up, they were given a bat and a ball when they're 5 years old, or a soccer ball, whatever. And right away they're playing on teams. And so they're learning all these skills of cooperating and leadership and strategizing and good sportsmanship and all these things that not coincidentally become the tools that you need to be a successful businessman or a successful in life. And little girls, we didn't have that until, junior high or high school. And then all of a sudden it was like a magician showing, his hat, opening up the tricks and showing. So we were like, oh, that's what this means. Just learning simple strategies in football and basketball was like opened up that half of our brain. And just, setting goals. I mean, that was a big deal in high school, in basketball. We'd write down our goals, and goal setting is huge in sports. So all of that led to, I think, this generation. Maybe we're the first. I don't think certainly there are successful women older than us. But I think Marjorie and I, and our generation has been, successful. We have gotten jobs that require leadership and to be strong women, to be strong role models, to be strong women. I think it's just going to keep continuing. I mean, little girls now, they're like I was when I was 17. Was like, are you kidding? I can't be the president. I can't be, a GM. I can't be. Let's just keep fostering that and give them the opportunities. There's no reason we have a woman vice president. There's no reason why we can't have a woman president one day, hopefully soon. And maybe that will open up even more. It kind of starts there. Let's not get into politics, but I was disappointed that we didn't have our first woman president. And I think that, that'll happen hopefully in my lifetime, and that'll be a huge deal. But there certainly are, like I said, a lot of successful women. Yeah. That doesn't mean that 93% doesn't mean that there's a bazillion C-suite women, but of those women, they did start in sports. So there's definitely a correlation.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think it's wonderful that we actually, we were early. There weren't a lot of sports teams in the 60s for women. You would hear some of these teams here now and then. But when we were in high school, it was about the time that high school teams for women started to become kind of ubiquitous across the country. And so we were fortunate to learn some of the things that the guys were learning in terms of teamwork, strategy, leadership, and all the things that you mentioned. And I think that sports just is a benefit to everybody. You don't have to go on and be professional. You play at your level, but you learn so much of the things that will carry you through life.
Do you have kids?
Sure.
Do you have kids?
Yep. Son and a daughter.
What's your daughter do?
My daughter is a nurse, and she's studying to be a nurse practitioner while she's working as a nurse. And my son is a professional musician.
No desire to be in athletics, either of them, and follow in mom's footsteps?
No. I mean, my son was the editor-in-chief of his high school paper, and he's a great writer. Both of them are really good writers, and they can speak and write and, communicate very well. I'm proud of them. And, both of them are great teachers, and they've had... my son teaches at Bard College in upstate New York while he works for West Point, and he plays in the brass quintet for them. So both of them, they both do really well with both sides of their brain, I think. I can't
and they're good kids.
Yeah, but no, they're very proud of them, and they're doing really well.
And I'm sure proud of their mother as well.
Yeah, well,
Hopefully, yes.
Well,
that's good.
Coming across our deadline here. We know you've got to get to your other things, but we sure appreciate you joining us for the show today. I mean, I think this has been really wonderful and very enlightening.
And in this time of the show, Marjorie and Marnie always go, "Uh-oh, is Scott going to ask that question again?" My question to you is, what's your takeaway for all the people that have been a part of this today? and heard all that you've shared with us, what's the one thing or two things that you want them all to remember? And maybe what is your legacy? How do you want us to remember you, who you are, and all that you've done?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like, if there are listeners out there, and I kind of doubt there are because you have a sports show, but, if there are those who haven't, given women's sports a try, whether to watch, whether it's, basketball or golf or tennis or watching your local lacrosse team play, Northwestern lacrosse is unbelievable. Watch the College Softball World Series. Start sort of watching them on their own merit, on their own playing field, and appreciate women and encourage, if it's your daughters or your granddaughters or, whoever it is, to participate. And it really doesn't have to be sports, any kind of team effort, I think is great. My daughter wasn't a big athlete, but she was a great speaker. She did speech in high school. She did theater. She got all the benefits, I think, of the kind of things that we see in sports. So I would just say encourage women. I hope that I'm encouraging as an assistant professor here at, Medill, to another generation of women in media. I think I see more and more young women every year wanting to be, and they don't see any barriers, no barriers. There's no reason why they don't think, they're play-by-play in baseball, and they're getting jobs, they're getting internships, and they're seeing women doing that. So I think we're going to see more and more. So if that's my legacy, just, encouraging the next generation, then I can live with that. That's not a bad one.
Well, that's great. We can't thank you enough for stopping by today. Continued success.
Thanks again.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. This has been fantastic.
It was really fun.
Okay.
All right.
We'll see you soon again. Stay well.
Okay.
And go,
You too.
right? And go WNBA and go women's basketball.
That's right.
And go Cats. Okay.
There you go. Yeah. I knew that was coming. I knew that was coming.
Exactly.
That's what everybody says here, so I mean, thanks, guys. Thanks.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, Missy.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Well, that was interesting. I thought she had some good things to say.
Oh, she definitely did. And,
Yeah.
I could relate to so much of it because we both came through high school in the 70s. And, for her, she says, that she could, 45 years down the road, yes, this is, you would expect this would be
Right.
the case. But I can't say that my experience, that I would have seen it coming because it's just so fantastic to see. And when I was playing high school basketball, you could hear every bounce of the ball. Our voices echoed. Nobody was there except a few parents.
Right,
And
right.
this is just wonderful to see.
So when are we going to start seeing, like, and certainly in the basketball world, the professional basketball players, their daughters coming through? So we had Jasmine Irving on our show.
Right.
She was an incredible basketball player. I mean, people obviously would go watch Jasmine just because they would be like, maybe Dr. J is going to be there.
Right.
But, she did not pursue a career in professional basketball. Just wasn't the right timing. This was a long time ago.
Yeah.
Certainly. But when are we going to see, like, we all are talking about Bronny and this one, but, like, when is it going to be like LeBron's daughters?
Well, I think with what's going on right now, I think you'll see that. Somebody that's maybe 8, 9, 10 years old right now goes, wow, I'd like to do that someday. I think just the publicity and the notoriety of all that's taking place now, kids that are not 17 or 18 necessarily say, oh, I want to do that. I see the young kids, somebody 8, 9, 10, 11 years old looks up to them is wow, when I grow up, when I get to high school, when I get to college, I want to be like that girl.
Right.
I think
But do
that's
you
when we'll
think
see it.
That the professionals are going to encourage their daughters to go into professional sports because maybe as women, they might think that, like, maybe this is a hard career for them, or maybe it's not so great. And, certainly playing in high school and college level, but then pursuing it as a, as a career. I don't know. We'll see because it hasn't happened yet. And certainly a lot of professional basketball players have daughters.
Right.
Yeah.
It's interesting because, you say, would they encourage them? I would hope that they would, in the sense that here's the thing. when I was covering the Dallas Cowboys, I remember Jim Jeffcoat. He had some pictures of his kids, over by his locker area at one point.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked him, "Are you going to encourage them to play football, the boys?" And he said, "No, it's a tough business. I'm going to encourage them to play, other things." He got him at one point into some kind of, it was karate or jujitsu or some other things, but he was not interested in having them play football. Now, at that point, they were very little.
Yeah.
Well, later, of course, one of his sons was a star for the University of Texas, and I asked Jim later. I said, "You told me that you weren't going to encourage them to play football. What happened?" And he said, "Well, they grew up and I found out they have a mind of their own."
That's right.
And so, you hope that they will decide to go into it and then be supported, like what we see with Jim, if they're not necessarily encouraging or pushing them in that direction.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, totally agree. Totally agree. Well, it's interesting. It's a whole different world now, but I'm really excited about the women's basketball. I really am, because I have always been a big proponent, big fan of my daughters and my sisters getting, and I've mentioned that already in the program here, but seeing them get involved.
Right.
Because I thought, they're a girl, but that doesn't matter.
Exactly.
Let them get involved and let them enjoy what I've enjoyed my entire life. And, I'd go play basketball in the backyard with my two little sisters, and then went and did the same thing with my daughter, and just
the closest I ever came to playing in on a team was just at school in the playground, and I was a decent athlete, but I remember when I was 10 years old, the boys had a softball team that they put together, 2 teams, and they'd play every lunchtime. Right. Well, they let me try out for the team, and I became the pitcher for one of it. It was fast pitch softball, and that was a great experience for the team.
Well, and it's not just, it might not be specifically in that sports, but just to be involved in athletics, no matter what fast. My daughter was, she was on the volleyball team. She was on the women's soccer team. She was on the women's basketball team. She became a cheerleader, and now just earlier this year, or I guess last year, when she flew to Amsterdam, Holland, and she ran in the marathon.
Oh wow!
26.2 miles.
Wow! And
she did the same thing in London. Oh my gosh! How proud am I as a dad?
Yeah.
And she's done it in New York, but that's so. Running is now something that she really enjoys. Yes, she enjoys.
Yeah, well, that's great.
Yeah.
Finding ways just to be involved in something.
Right, exactly right.
I went to a small school that was boys only, and then they started letting girls in. So I was the 3rd class with girls to actually
You just wanted to go to an all-boys school. Don't even go down that road.
No, they were so desperate. They were taking anybody, they were just like, if she is a woman, we want her, because they wanted to start, bringing in girls. Yeah, they were trying to.
And she wanted to meet all the boys. I mean, come on.
Although I will tell you this.
Here it goes. See,
No, it was terrible, because at the end of the day, we would be bedraggled and look, after a full day with the boys, and the girls from the all-girls school would show up for the sporting events, and they would look perfect, and their eyeliner was great, and we were a mess, and the boys were just like, go away. But because there were so few girl sports at that point in the school, they were slowly putting them in, in part of the the curriculum, that we found ourselves being managers of the different teams. So my friend Nessa, who we managed the boys varsity baseball team, and we got and I never even realized this until later. We went back to school, and in the gymnasium or in the cafeteria, we got varsity letters.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. Did you really?
So we did.
Wow.
Oh, now that's fantastic.
Yeah.
See, and I think a lot of schools might not do that. I think that's awesome that they did that.
We got varsity letters. So
you were a part of the team in a different way.
Right. Yeah. Yep.
Oh, I think that's outstanding. Well, guess what? So, we've got less than a minute here to wrap things up. So I guess we just say thank you to our special guest. She was wonderful.
She was terrific.
And go in women's sports.
That's
Make
right.
a difference, right? And get involved and be the best you can be. That's great. Well, that's it for this edition of Journey Through Sports and Life. I'm Scott.
Marjorie.
Marnie.
So until next time, stay well, be safe, and remember, get involved in sports. So long, everybody.